What if the reason you haven't reached your potential has nothing to do with how much potential you actually have? What if the real limit is something far more invisible, something that doesn't say, "You can't"? It simply whispers, "Don't risk finding out." Imagine two children sitting in the same classroom, same teacher, same lesson, same test, same difficult question. Neither knows the answer. The first child looks at the question, and somewhere inside, something tightens. If I get this wrong, maybe I'm not as smart as everyone thinks I am. So the child hesitates, avoids, perhaps doesn't even try. The second child looks at the exact same question and thinks, "I don't know how to do this yet." Same question, same difficulty, same present ability, but psychologically, they are living in two completely different worlds because one child is protecting an identity, the other is building an ability, and over the next 10, 20, 30 years, that tiny difference can become enormous. This journey is inspired by Mindset, the groundbreaking work of psychologist Dr. Carol S. Dweck. But this is not a book summary. It is not an audiobook. And it is not a chapter-by-chapter explanation of mindset. This is beyond the book. Because we're going to take one of the most influential ideas in modern psychology and ask questions that go far beyond, do you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? We're going to explore what happens when intelligence becomes identity, why talented people sometimes become terrified of difficult things, why praise can unexpectedly weaken the person it was intended to strengthen, why some people need to appear intelligent more than they need to become intelligent, why failure can become psychologically dangerous when the mind stops interpreting it as an event and begins interpreting it as evidence of who you are, and most importantly, how the beliefs you carry about your own ability can quietly determine what happens when life becomes difficult. Because almost everyone likes the idea of growth. Ask someone, do you believe people can learn? Of course. Can people improve? Yes. Can practice make someone better? Obviously. But those questions are easy when nothing important is at stake. The real mindset doesn't reveal itself when you are succeeding. It reveals itself when your identity is threatened. When someone criticizes your work. When somebody younger becomes better than you. When the thing you were naturally good at suddenly becomes difficult. When you enter a room where you are no longer the smartest person. When you try something new and look completely average. When someone says no. When you lose. When you fail publicly. When your first attempt looks nothing like the person you imagined yourself becoming. That is where mindset stops being theory. Imagine someone who has always been told, you are brilliant. At first, that sounds like a gift. Teachers admire them. Parents proudly introduce them. Friends ask them for answers. And slowly, without anybody intending it, a psychological contract may begin forming. My value comes from being brilliant. Now, what happens when brilliance is no longer guaranteed? A harder class, a more competitive university, a bigger company, a stronger opponent, a room filled with people equally talented. Suddenly, difficulty isn't simply difficulty. Difficulty becomes evidence. If this is hard for me, maybe I'm not brilliant. And now, something strange can happen. The person who seemed most capable of growth may begin avoiding the very experiences required for growth. They choose the easier challenge. They prepare excuses before results arrive. They hide mistakes. They blame circumstances. They stop asking questions because asking might reveal that they don't know. They compare constantly. They become defensive around feedback. And from the outside, it may look like arrogance, laziness, lack of discipline, or lack of ambition. But underneath, something more subtle may be happening. Identity protection. Remember what we discovered in psycho-cybernetics. Human behavior can become organized around an internal picture of who we believe we are. Now, mindset adds another fascinating layer. What happens when that picture contains a belief about whether your qualities can actually develop? Suppose your self-image says, "I am intelligent." That sounds positive. But if intelligence is something you believe, you either possess or don't possess, then every difficult problem becomes a test of identity. Now imagine instead the internal picture says, "I am someone who can learn difficult things." Notice the psychological difference. The first identity must constantly prove itself. The second can improve itself. This distinction can appear everywhere. I'm naturally confident. I'm not a confident person. I'm creative. I'm not creative. I'm good with people. I'm terrible with people. I'm a born leader. I'm not leadership material. I'm just not good at mathematics. I'm not athletic. I'm bad at languages. I'm not disciplined. I'm too old to learn this. Listen carefully to those sentences. They sound like descriptions, but sometimes they become instructions. Because once the mind concludes, "This is what I am," it begins deciding which experiences are worth attempting. And that creates an invisible ceiling, not a ceiling built by the world, a ceiling built from interpretation. You approach it every time. Growth requires looking incompetent first. Every time, learning requires being corrected. Every time, mastery requires failing publicly. Every time, the next level requires entering a room where your old identity no longer guarantees that you will be exceptional. And something inside says, maybe stay here. Not because here is better, because here you already know who you are. This is one reason potential can be deceptive. We often imagine potential as something stored inside a person, waiting to be discovered. You have enormous potential, but potential that must constantly protect itself may never become ability, because development requires friction, confusion, correction, embarrassment, repetition, feedback, failure, beginning again. The very experiences that reveal what you cannot yet do are often the experiences that teach you how to do it. Think about the first time someone learns to play piano. The hands don't cooperate, the rhythm breaks, wrong notes appear. Nothing sounds like music. Imagine if the beginner concluded from those first 20 minutes, "I clearly have no musical ability." The evidence would appear convincing, but the evidence would be answering the wrong question. It would tell you what the person can do today, not necessarily what the person can learn to do. Those are two very different measurements. And perhaps this is one of the most dangerous mistakes we make about ourselves. We take a snapshot of current performance and treat it like a photograph of permanent potential. I couldn't do it becomes I can't do it. I don't know becomes I'm not intelligent enough. I failed becomes I'm not made for this. Present tense quietly becomes future tense, and a temporary limitation becomes an invisible ceiling. But growth mindset doesn't mean telling yourself you can become anything. Reality matters. Biology matters. Opportunity matters. Resources matter. Training matters. Strategy matters. Different people begin from different places with different strengths and different constraints. Growth mindset is not the denial of differences. It is the refusal to assume that today's ability automatically reveals tomorrow's possibility. And that one distinction changes the meaning of difficulty. If ability is fixed, difficulty says you're reaching your limit. If ability can develop, difficulty may say you're reaching the edge of what you know. And those two interpretations produce very different behavior. One asks, how do I escape without looking incapable? The other asks, what do I need to learn next? Now imagine two employees receiving the same feedback. Their manager says, this presentation wasn't strong enough. Your argument wasn't clear, and the data needs more work. The first employee hears, I'm not good enough. The second hears, my argument needs clarity, and my data needs work. Same feedback, but one person receives an identity verdict. The other receives information. One goes home defending the self. The other goes home improving the skill. And after 5 years, people may look at them and say, one was simply more talented. But perhaps what they are seeing is the compounded result of thousands of interpretations. This is where atomic habits, psycho-cybernetics, and mindset begin touching the same human being from 3 different directions. What you repeatedly do creates evidence about who you are, who you believe you are, influences what feels natural to do, and what you believe about your ability to develop influences what you do when improvement becomes uncomfortable. Behavior, self-image, mindset, 3 layers, 1 life. So perhaps the question isn't simply, do I have a growth mindset? That's too easy. Ask instead, where in my life do I desperately need to look capable? Where do I avoid being a beginner? What criticism immediately makes me defensive? Whose success makes me question my own value? Where do I say, I'm just not that kind of person? What would I attempt if being bad at it for a while didn't embarrass me? And perhaps the most revealing question of all, what part of my identity am I protecting at the cost of my own growth? Because there may be 2 worlds available to you inside the exact same life. In one, every challenge asks you, are you good enough? In the other, every challenge asks, what can you learn here? Same challenge, same person, same starting point, but perhaps a completely different future. And to understand how something as small as an interpretation can eventually create 2 radically different lives, we need to enter those 2 worlds and watch what happens next.